That Thursday evening, the rain in Charlotte fell with a small, persistent, cold sound, not fierce enough to be called a storm, but enough to make every windowpane in the suburban neighborhood shine with long streaks of water, as if someone had dragged their fingernails down the glass. Emily Parker got home at 6:18, nearly 40 minutes later than usual, because a mother at the pediatric clinic had cried right in front of the reception desk after insurance denied coverage for her son's injection, and Emily, who had never been able to leave something tangled if she still had one more phone call she could make, had stayed after hours to speak to both parties, resend the file code, check the follow-up schedule, and only then walk out to the parking lot when the sky had gone completely dark. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, her hair stuck lightly to the back of her neck, and in her hand was a grocery bag from Harris Teeter, holding heavy cream, brown sugar, unsalted butter, pecans, and a package of vanilla wafers for the dessert she was planning to make for Charles and Margaret Parker's 45th wedding anniversary party that weekend. She had meant to make bourbon pecan trifle, Margaret's favorite, though Margaret could no longer stand long enough to make it herself after last year's knee surgery. The light in Emily's kitchen was still glowing yellow. The dishwasher had finished running that morning but had not been unloaded. On the counter sat Daniel's cold coffee mug, a dried brown stain circling the rim, beside the apple cinnamon candle Emily had lit before leaving for work, because she always liked the house to smell warm when she came home. Everything looked so normal that later Emily would hate that normalcy itself. Some disasters do not enter with slamming doors or breaking glass. They sit waiting in the kitchen, neat and quiet, until someone comes home, sets down the groceries, and realizes her life has already been rearranged without her being there. Daniel Parker was sitting at the kitchen table, still in his white dress shirt and gray slacks, his tie loosened but not fully removed, both hands resting beside a pale yellow manila envelope. He did not stand to kiss her. He did not ask how her day had been. He did not mention whether his mother had called or whether Abigail had texted about the guest list. He only sat there with the calm expression Emily had once considered the best thing about him. Daniel was a corporate attorney, the kind of man who could listen to a panicked client talk about a collapsing merger and still keep his voice level, who could say, "We'll handle this one piece at a time," and make people believe there was still order in the room. For 12 years that calm had been the railing Emily held onto during difficult seasons. That night it became a wall. "Sit down," Daniel said. Emily was still holding the grocery bag. A carton of cream slid inside it and bumped softly against the butter. "What's going on?" Daniel looked at the envelope, then pushed it across the table with 2 fingers, a neat, light, polite gesture, as if he were handing her a restaurant bill. "I filed for divorce." The words did not echo right away. Emily heard them, but her body did not receive them. She looked at the envelope, at his hands, at the wedding ring still sitting on his left hand like a small lie made of white gold. Rain tapped steadily against the window. The heater kicked on inside the wall with a low hum. "What did you say?" Daniel closed his eyes for a second, the tired closing of a man who had already prepared himself to look as if he were hurting too. "I filed. The lawyer submitted the paperwork this morning." Emily set the grocery bag down on the chair beside her because if she put it on the table, she was afraid her hands would knock everything over. "You filed before telling me. I know how that sounds." "How that sounds?" A small dry laugh escaped her. Not really a laugh at all. Daniel remained seated. "Emily, I didn't want to turn this conversation into a fight. I thought if I told you beforehand we would get trapped in emotion and no one would make anything clear." She stared at him for a long time. This man had once asked her what color sofa she wanted. Whether she wanted to buy in this neighborhood or closer to the school. Whether she wanted to go to Charleston for their 10th anniversary. But ending their marriage, putting her name into cold legal paperwork, he had done alone so he could avoid being trapped in emotion. Emily picked up the envelope. The paper inside was thick and dry, smelling faintly of printer ink and law offices, nothing like 12 years of marriage. Her name was on the first page, Emily Ann Parker. His name beside it, Daniel James Parker. Names that had once sat beside each other on wedding invitations, mortgage papers, health insurance forms, Christmas cards, now sat beside each other inside a legal structure designed to separate them. She had not even reached the second page when Daniel said the second sentence, the one she would later remember even more clearly than the first. "I need you not to tell my family yet." Emily looked up. For one moment she truly did not understand. "What?" Daniel rubbed his hands together, then placed them back on the table. "Not for long. Just a few weeks. My parents' anniversary is this weekend. Abigail is about to have the baby. Mom's been stressed about her knee and Dad's blood pressure. If they find out right now, everything will explode. Emily looked at him as if she had just discovered the envelope was not the cruelest thing in the kitchen. You filed for divorce from me, and now you're asking me to keep it secret so your parents can have a pretty party. It's not just the party. His voice softened, became more reasonable, like he was presenting before a board. My family has been planning this for months. People are flying in. Charles and Margaret have been looking forward to it. Abigail doesn't need a shock right now. She's 36 weeks pregnant, Emily. You know how anxious she gets. Don't use Abigail. I'm not using anyone. I'm thinking about the consequences of what you did. For the first time, Daniel's face tightened slightly. Of the fact that this marriage isn't working anymore. No, of the fact that you filed without telling your wife. He exhaled slowly. I want this to be civil. The word dropped onto the table between them like a knife wrapped in a napkin. Civil. In Daniel's dictionary, civil meant not crying too loudly, not telling the truth at the wrong time, not embarrassing anyone, not letting Emily's emotions disrupt the Parker family schedule. Emily looked down at the petition. The filing date was today, but the preparation notes listed milestones from 2 weeks earlier. She had not examined everything yet, but she had seen enough to know he had not come to the kitchen table with a question. He had come with a result and a request. What about me? She asked. What about you? Daniel looked at her, and he did look genuinely pained, but his pain had a shape that was very convenient for him. You're stronger than they are. Emily went still. That sentence was a clean cut. You're stronger than they are. Because she was strong, she could endure more. Because she knew how to keep herself together, she could hide it. Because she knew how to make dessert, answer Margaret's calls, remember Charles's appointments. She could also protect the reputation of the man who had just signed papers to leave her. Daniel continued more gently now. I'm not saying you can't hurt, I'm just asking you to choose the timing. 3 weeks. After the party, after Abigail is more settled, we'll tell them together. Together, kindly. Emily heard the word together, and found it more insulting than any coldness. He had decided alone, signed alone, filed alone, and now he wanted to borrow the word together for the announcement so the story would look better. She placed the petition back into the envelope. How many times have you asked me to protect your image, Daniel? He frowned slightly. That's not fair. No, what isn't fair is that I'm still standing here with butter and cream to make dessert for your mother, while you hand me divorce papers and a performance schedule. Before, Daniel turned Emily into a secret that needed managing. She had once been part of the Parker family in a way so sincere that losing them felt like losing a second home. Emily met Margaret Parker for the first time at a Sunday lunch after church, when she had been dating Daniel for 5 months. Margaret wore a pale floral dress, her silver hair neatly curled, her southern voice soft but lined with steel, and she asked Emily whether she liked cooking in a way that made Emily understand it was not only a question about hobbies. Charles Parker, a retired judge, sat at the head of the porch table, quiet, observant, with eyes that made many people straighten their backs without realizing it. Abigail, Daniel's younger sister, 22 then, laughed loudly and asked whether Emily could survive a family that argued about politics and biscuit recipes with equal seriousness. Emily had not entered the Parker household with brightness. She had entered by remembering. The second time she came over, she remembered that Charles drank his coffee black but disliked the cup being too hot. The third time, she brought a green bean salad because Margaret had mentioned in passing that she wanted something lighter. In the first year after Emily married Daniel, when he forgot Abigail's birthday because he was buried in a major contract case, Emily bought flowers, sent a card, signed both of their names, then texted Daniel at noon to remind him to call his sister. Abigail later told the whole family that Daniel had finally learned to remember birthdays, and Daniel laughed, kissed Emily's cheek in the kitchen and whispered, "Saved me again." When Margaret had knee surgery, Emily was the one who arrived at the Parker house at 6 in the morning, changed ice packs, measured medication, wrote out physical therapy schedules, cooked chicken porridge, and called insurance to ask why the walker had not been delivered yet. Daniel was busy with a corporate case at the time and stopped by in the evenings, bringing flowers, sitting beside his mother for half an hour, while Margaret stroked his hand and said, "My sweet boy, always so thoughtful." Emily stood in the kitchen washing the pot, heard that sentence, felt a small sting, and blamed herself for being petty. She swallowed that pettiness for many years. She swallowed it when Charles praised Daniel for keeping the family close. After every Thanksgiving Emily planned, every table she set, every piece of silver she polished, every relative she called to ask about allergies. She swallowed it when Parker relatives said Daniel was lucky to have a wife who knew how to keep a home, as if she were a tasteful detail on his resume. She had once felt proud to be needed. Once felt happy when Margaret said, "Without you, Daniel would never keep this family in line." Back then, that sentence sounded like love. Only on the night Daniel laid the manila envelope on the table did Emily finally hear what lived underneath it. Without her, Daniel did not have to be the thoughtful son, the steady husband, the perfect Parker man all on his own. She had not only loved him, she had operated his image. In the months before the manila envelope, their marriage had been hollowing out little by little. But Emily did not name it because she was too good at explaining other people away. Daniel came home later, but he was a corporate attorney, and the final quarter of the year was always full of mergers, contracts, clients in crisis. He sat in the car for 10 extra minutes before coming inside, but he said he was wrapping up work calls. He showered as soon as he came home, changed clothes, put his dress shirts in a separate wash instead of leaving them in the shared hamper. But he said he had been meeting more clients lately, and wanted to handle the work clothes himself. He changed the password to the shared email they had always used for bills and family invitations, saying the firm had recommended stronger security. One night, Emily woke at 2 a.m. because she was thirsty and saw the light from Daniel's phone reflected on his face in the dark. He was lying on his side, scrolling through messages. When he realized she was awake, he shut the screen too quickly. The next morning, she asked him about it. Daniel poured coffee, not flustered at all. "West Coast client sent something late. Did you delete the conversation?" He looked at her for a moment, not angry, only sadly tired. "Are you looking for something to worry about?" That sentence made her retreat immediately, not because she fully believed him, but because it placed her in the role of the sensitive wife, the woman making tension out of a marriage that was only strained because of work. She hated that role. She told herself she did not want to become the kind of woman who checked her husband's phone. Told herself Daniel was always polite, never rough, never said anything ugly. Told herself every couple after 12 years had seasons of silence. One evening, Margaret called to ask whether Daniel had chosen photos for the anniversary slideshow yet. Daniel was sitting in his office with the door cracked open, so Emily answered for him. "I'll remind him tonight." She went into the office and saw him looking at a document on his laptop, but he closed the screen as soon as she entered. "Your mother asked about the slideshow photos. Can you pick them for me?" he said, rubbing his forehead. "You're better at those things." Emily stood in the doorway, hallway light behind her, looking at the man everyone called the family's pillar, and what she felt then was not anger. It was a kind of exhaustion so familiar that she mistook it for normal. She had spent so long working backstage for Daniel that she had begun tidying the emptiness in their marriage like another messy room. The day after the manila envelope, Emily still went to work. That made her feel strange. Should a woman who had just received divorce papers from her husband be standing in a pediatric clinic at 8 a.m, checking vaccination schedules, calling parents, dealing with a child who threw up on a waiting room chair, reminding the new receptionist how to enter Medicaid codes? But life did not stop for one person's private paperwork. Children still had fevers, phones still rang, printers still jammed. Emily stood at the reception counter and typed the wrong system password 3 times. Rachel Kim, her best friend and coworker, looked over from the next desk, set down a folder and said, "Break room, I'm fine. You just typed the clinic password into the patient name field." Emily went quiet. Rachel pulled her into the small break room with its old coffee machine, mini fridge, January shift schedule pinned to the board, and the smell of reheated soup. Rachel was the kind of woman who did not waste time with decorative comfort. She shut the door and folded her arms. "Tell me." Emily opened her mouth, but the first sentence would not come. She held a paper cup, squeezing until the rim bent. "Daniel filed for divorce." Rachel did not say, "Oh my God," right away. Her face hardened. "When did he tell you?" "Last night." "When did he file?" "Yesterday morning." Rachel slowly placed one hand on the counter. "He filed before he told you." Emily nodded. "And he wants me not to tell his family for a few weeks." Rachel looked at her for another second, then said the sentence Emily needed to hear but was afraid of hearing. "He filed before telling you, and now he wants you to keep it secret so he can choose the story." Emily closed her eyes. Once Rachel said it, the situation was no longer wrapped in Daniel's soft voice. It was naked, ugly, hard to avoid. "He said his parents have the anniversary party. Abigail is about to give birth. Charles's blood pressure is high. Margaret would fall apart. And you?" "He said I'm stronger than they are." Rachel laughed, sharp and joyless. "Of course. People always call women strong when they need them to carry the part nobody else wants. Emily sat down. I don't want to make everything worse. Rachel pulled out the chair across from her. Everything is already worse, Em. You just found out. The sentence passed through her like cold water. Rachel continued, quieter now. You need your own lawyer, not anyone he recommends. Don't sign anything else. Take photos of the petition. Check the accounts. Save messages. And don't let him turn you into someone who agreed by staying silent. Emily looked at the mini fridge, where an old cat magnet from a former employee still clung to the door. It feels dirty to think about collecting evidence. Dirty is filing for divorce, and then making your wife carry a casserole to your mother like nothing happened. Rachel leaned forward. You're not destroying the house by turning on the light. The person who switched off the light did that. Even though Rachel was right, Emily still went to the Parker house Friday night to help Margaret prepare for the anniversary party. That was what she hated most about herself in those early days, not because she was weak, but because she could keep functioning even while wounded. She drove through the rain-slick streets, past red brick houses with warm porch lights, carrying trays for candles, vendor lists, printed guest counts, and a folded copy of the divorce papers in her handbag. Charles and Margaret Parker's house sat in a quiet neighborhood with old oak trees, a wide porch, white columns, and a living room full of generations of family photographs. Inside, it smelled of polished wood, slow-roasted meat, white lilies, and Margaret's light perfume. Margaret opened the door, leaning on her cane, her face brightening when she saw Emily. Oh, honey, you're here. I don't know what I'd do without you. She hugged Emily with one arm because her knee was still weak. Emily stood stiff in that embrace, feeling loved and tied down at the same time. Daniel stood behind the living room, talking to Charles about a possible partner promotion at the firm. He looked at Emily, his gaze pausing only for a beat, long enough to remind her of her promise. Not the marriage promise, the silence promise. Margaret pulled her into the dining room, where the white tablecloth was only half spread, the flowers still unarranged, old picture frames piled in a box. Abigail will be late. Her feet are terribly swollen. Daniel said you already called to confirm the cake, didn't he? Yes. They'll deliver it Sunday at 3. You are a lifesaver. Emily smiled, her mouth making the familiar movement before her heart could object. She arranged candles along the table, straightened the cloth, called the restaurant to confirm the food, added the name of a guest with a shellfish allergy. Every little task went so smoothly that Margaret never noticed Emily's hand shaking when she opened her phone. A relative called to ask whether she should bring anything, and Margaret handed the phone to Emily out of habit. Could you talk to Aunt Lorraine for me, sweetheart? My hands are full. Emily took the phone. Aunt Lorraine said, Emily, you and Daniel are the couple everyone should learn from. 12 years and you still take such good care of the family. Emily looked across the room at Daniel standing beside the fireplace, accepting Charles's praise for the anniversary speech he planned to give, and she felt as if she were decorating the stage for her own marriage's funeral. No one in that room hated her. That was what made it suffocating. They loved her truly. But they loved a version of her that had not been allowed to tell the truth. Abigail pulled Emily into the unfinished nursery at the end of the evening, where the pale blue wallpaper was patterned with white clouds, baby shower gifts were stacked on the floor, a new rocking chair sat by the wall, and tiny clothes were sorted by month in neat bags. Abigail Parker was heavily pregnant, her face rounder, her eyes tired but still bright. She had always been closer to Emily than Daniel understood. Years ago, after an early miscarriage, Abigail had called Emily in the middle of the night before calling even her own mother, because Emily knew how to be quiet in the right way, knew how not to turn someone else's pain into a lesson. That night, Abigail lowered herself into the rocking chair and sighed. Sit for a minute. You've been running around since you got here. Emily sat on a gift box near the door. I'm fine. Abigail looked at her. No, you're not. I just don't know why yet. Emily turned her face away, pretending to look at the tiny shirts hanging in the closet. Just work. Everyone in this family says work when they don't want to tell the truth. Abigail placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, making the fabric of her dress shift. She smiled tiredly. I wanted to ask you something. Emily looked back. What is it? Abigail hesitated, then said, Ryan and I talked. We want you to be the baby's godmother. The room seemed to shrink. Emily looked at the wallpaper, the gift boxes, the white stuffed bear on the shelf. She wanted to cry instantly, not because the request was not beautiful, but because it was too beautiful at a moment too cruel. Being godmother meant belonging to this family in another way, deeper, longer, just as the man who connected her to them had cut her out with a petition already filed. Daniel stood in the hallway right then, perhaps passing by, perhaps listening. He looked into the room and his eyes held no obvious pleading or threat, only a quiet reminder, "Don't tell." Emily swallowed. Abigail smiled, her eyes wet. "You're the most steady person in this family. I know that sounds strange, but when I think about who would always remember birthdays, who would send books at the right age, who would tell the truth if my child needed to hear it, I think of you." Emily saw Daniel lower his eyes in the doorway, as if the praise did not touch him. She took Abigail's hand. "I'd be honored." Abigail hugged her, awkwardly because of her belly. Emily hugged her back, and it felt as if she had just signed another emotional contract without anyone knowing she was under pressure. She had not lost the Parker family yet, but she had already begun hurting as if she were losing them. And Daniel, who had filed before telling her, still stood in the hall, letting her carry the real love of his sister as one more reason to remain silent. Thomas Reed's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building in downtown Charlotte, where the hallway smelled of air conditioning, new paper, and expensive coffee. Emily went to see him Saturday morning, telling Margaret she had a nail appointment before the party. A small lie that disgusted her, but that she still told because she was not yet strong enough to tear everything open at once. Thomas was the divorce attorney Rachel had found through a friend in his 40s, salt and pepper hair, his voice neither too soft nor too hard. He read Daniel's petition in silence, turning each page, marking a few lines with a pencil. Emily sat across from him, her hands on her purse, nails pressing into her skin. "He said he filed Thursday morning," she said. Thomas nodded. "The petition was filed Thursday morning, yes. But the preparation goes back farther." He turned the page toward her. "There are communications with his attorney from nearly 3 months ago. There's an asset list. There's a proposed sale of the house, or an option for him to buy out your share based on an internal valuation. There's a retirement account division proposal that benefits him considerably if no one reviews it carefully. And in the relationship summary, his attorney writes that the parties have been emotionally separated for a long period and jointly recognize that the marriage cannot continue." Emily stared at the phrase "emotionally separated." It was cold and tidy, sounding like a shared truth, saying nothing about the dinners she had cooked, the parties she had prepared, the nights Daniel had slept beside her like he still belonged to the house. He had not only filed, he had rewritten their past in legal language before telling her about the present. "I don't agree with that," she said. Her voice was small. Thomas looked at her over his glasses. "Then don't let it be the only version that exists. He wants me to keep it secret from his family for a few weeks." "His family or everyone?" "His family. Friends." She stopped. "I don't know." Thomas set his pencil down. "Mrs. Parker, I can't tell you what to do within your family. But strategically, whoever controls the first version usually has the advantage. If you remain silent while he has already prepared legally, financially, and narratively, you are giving him time." Emily looked out the window. Below, cars moved along wet streets, people walking with coats wrapped tightly around them. The city kept functioning. "I don't want to turn myself into someone vindictive. Keeping records is not vindictive. Telling the truth is not vindictive. Revenge is hurting someone because you are hurt. Protecting yourself is refusing to let someone use your pain as paperwork in their favor." Thomas pushed a short list toward her. "Photograph everything. Do not sign any joint statement if it isn't true. Check the accounts. Change your personal passwords. And don't let the word civil talk you into agreeing to something harmful." Emily took the list. There were only a few lines on the paper, but to her it felt like a new language. She was used to making lists to help other people. Margaret's medications, Abigail's gifts, Charles's slideshow photos, Daniel's work schedule. For the first time, a list had been written to protect her. That evening, evidence arrived in a small and dirty way. Daniel was in the shower, and his phone was on the kitchen counter, face down, but the screen lit up with a message. Emily did not intend to look. She had promised herself she would not become the kind of person who watched a phone. But after Thomas's office, that promise sounded like an ethical rule designed so the person being kept in the dark would never discover she was being kept in the dark. The phone buzzed again. The screen showed Mark Ellison's name. Mark was Daniel's closest friend from law school, the man who had been his best man, who had once sat in their backyard drinking beer and told Emily that Daniel was lucky to have married someone who knew how to organize his life. The message preview read, "Still doing the anniversary show this weekend? After that you're free, man." Emily stood still, a dish towel still in her hand. Anniversary show. After that he was free. She had not only been asked to hide it from his family. Daniel had told his friend. Mark knew. Maybe others did too. Emily took out her own phone and photographed Daniel's screen while the message was still lit. Her hand shook, but not as much as she expected. A second wound often has a different shape than the first. It is less shocking, more humiliating. When Daniel came into the kitchen 10 minutes later, his hair wet, wearing a gray t-shirt, Emily set down the towel. Mark knows. Daniel looked at his phone, then at her. You read my messages? Mark knows. I talked to him. I needed someone to talk to. And I didn't? You have Rachel. After you filed, I had Rachel. Daniel inhaled, keeping his voice level. Mark isn't my family. He has nothing to do with the party. I just needed support. Emily gave a small laugh. Support? You have support. You had a lawyer first. You had Mark first. Who else knew before your wife? This is exactly why I didn't want to talk beforehand. You turn everything into a trial. You're the one who filed in court. That silenced him for half a second. I don't want to argue. Of course, arguing ruins the image of civility. Daniel looked at her longer. You're changing. No, I'm stopping myself from translating everything you do into a kinder version. He picked up his phone and left the kitchen. Emily remained under the yellow light, listening to the rain outside, realizing that this secret was not meant to protect the family from pain. It protected the exact group Daniel feared would be disappointed in him. His friends already knew enough to congratulate him on freedom. His family still looked at Emily like a treasured wife, and she, the one being left, had been assigned the job of keeping those two worlds from colliding until the moment he chose. On Sunday, the rehearsal dinner before the main party took place in an old southern restaurant with dark wooden walls, warm lights, white cloth napkins, and neatly arranged wine glasses. The Parker family wanted an intimate evening before the larger celebration, just close relatives and a few old friends. Emily wore a simple black dress, Daniel wore a navy suit, and they stood together at the entrance greeting guests as if they were still a couple naturally placed side by side. Every handshake, every "you two look wonderful," every hug from a relative made Emily feel as if her skin were being stretched over a skeleton that no longer fit. Charles raised his glass midway through dinner, his voice deep, slow, authoritative, like it still belonged in a courtroom. He spoke about 45 years of marriage, about difficult seasons, about love not as a feeling but as a commitment repeated every day. The secret, Charles said, looking around the table, is not running away when things get hard. People laughed, a few clapped. Margaret wiped her eyes. Abigail took Ryan's hand, her husband's, and rested it on her belly. Daniel placed his hand over Emily's beneath the table. It was not a loving touch, it was a signal. Hold the roll. Emily looked at his hand, at the fingers that had signed the divorce papers, texted Mark, and helped write a legal narrative about emotional separation, now resting on hers during a dinner praising commitment. She pulled her hand away very quietly. Daniel did not look at her right away, but his jaw tightened. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood, raised his glass, and spoke about his parents in a carefully prepared speech. I grew up in a home where promises carried weight, where honor wasn't something people talked about when life was easy, but something they held on to when life became difficult. Emily listened and felt a thin wave of nausea rise. He spoke beautifully. That was the most frightening part. Daniel was not clumsily hypocritical. He understood morality well enough to use its language. Everyone looked at him with pride. Charles nodded. Margaret cried. Emily sat beside her untouched water glass, listening to her husband praise the values he had just betrayed, knowing that if she stood and told the truth then, the entire room would look at her like someone throwing a knife into a hymn. Daniel finished and people clapped. He sat down, leaned toward her and whispered, "Thank you." Emily did not turn. "Don't thank me for being silent." He paused. "I was thanking you for being gracious." "No, you're thanking me for still being useful." After dinner, Abigail pulled Emily out onto the restaurant's back porch. String lights hung along the railing. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cold, their breaths forming small white clouds. Abigail wore a long cardigan, one hand over her belly, her face tighter than usual. "There's something going on between you and Daniel, isn't there?" she asked. Emily looked down at the parking lot, where headlights reflected on the wet pavement. "Abby, I'm not asking to be nosy. I'm asking because tonight he looked at you like he was checking whether you were doing something correctly. And you looked at him like you'd read something you couldn't unread." Emily closed her eyes. She wanted to tell her, wanted to lay her head on Abigail's shoulder the way Abigail once had after the miscarriage. But Abigail's belly was large, her eyes were tired, and Daniel's voice echoed in Emily's head. "Abigail is about to give birth. Don't upset her." "I don't know what Daniel has told you," Emily said. Abigail looked at her for a long time. "Nothing. That's what scares me." That sentence opened a narrow crack in the sealed room. Emily turned toward her. Abigail rested one hand on the railing, her nude painted nails tapping softly on the wood. You know, in my family, silence is usually called manners. Dad goes silent when he's disappointed. Mom goes silent when she's hurt. Daniel goes silent when he wants everyone to understand what benefits him without him having to say it. I grew up with it, so I recognize it. If something is happening, you don't have to protect him from himself. Emily swallowed. You're pregnant. Abigail gave a small, tired laugh. I know, everyone keeps reminding me like my stomach took away my right to hear the truth. Emily looked at the sister-in-law she truly loved, and the truth nearly rose out of her. But then the porch door opened. Daniel stepped out, coat in hand. You two are freezing out here. He looked at Emily, then at Abigail. Abby, Ryan's looking for you. Abigail did not look away from Emily immediately. I'm right here. Daniel smiled, but the smile had an edge. I just don't want you standing too long, Abigail replied. I know how to sit down when I'm tired, Daniel. A very small sentence, but Emily saw Daniel stiffen slightly. For the first time, Parker did not let him manage the room completely. When Abigail went inside first, Daniel stayed with Emily. What did you say to her? Not enough. Emily, are you that afraid of me telling the truth? He lowered his voice. I'm afraid of you hurting people who don't deserve to be dragged into this. The people who don't deserve to be dragged into this were dragged in by you the moment you used them as your reason. Daniel looked at her, and in the yellow light from the porch door, he seemed truly irritated for the first time. You're becoming bitter. Emily nodded slightly. Maybe, or maybe, I'm becoming less convenient. The night before the main party, Daniel handed Emily a draft announcement. He did it in their living room, where the gray sofa they had chosen after 3 months of debate still sat, where their wedding photos still stood on the shelf beside a vase of dried flowers. Emily was reorganizing Margaret's guest list when Daniel placed a sheet of paper on the table. I want you to look at this wording. Emily looked up. Wording? For the email to the family in a few weeks. I thought if we agreed on it beforehand, it would be easier on everyone. She picked up the paper. The first line read, After many months of shared reflection and many honest conversations, we have decided to part ways with respect. Emily read the word shared again and again. Many honest conversations, decided to part ways with respect. Not one sentence said he had filed first. Not one sentence said Emily had found out after his lawyer and his best friend. Not one sentence said she had been asked to stand beside him at the anniversary party so his parents would not be disappointed. No, she said. Daniel sat in the chair across from her. You haven't even read all of it. I don't need to. I think this causes the least pain. Emily set the page down. For whom? For everyone. No, for you. He rubbed his face. What do you want me to write? That I'm the villain? That I'm cruel? Our marriage has had problems for a long time, Emily. You can't pretend everything was perfect and I suddenly filed. I'm not pretending it was perfect. I just didn't know you had hired a lawyer to turn our exhaustion into legal language against me. No one is against you. You wrote shared reflection when I wasn't allowed to know. Because I knew you'd react like this. Again, you're using my reaction to your dishonesty to justify your dishonesty. Daniel stood and went to the window. Outside, the streetlight shone over the wet lawn. I'm trying to preserve dignity for both of us. Emily laughed very softly. My dignity doesn't need you to write it for me. He turned back. If you make a scene at the party tomorrow, you'll regret it. The sentence was not loud, not crude, but it revealed something beneath his politeness. A warning. Emily looked at him. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. Daniel pressed his lips together. I'm not threatening you. No. You're just reminding me that for our entire marriage, you've known what I'm afraid of. He picked up the draft. I still hope you'll choose the civil way. Emily looked at the wedding photo on the shelf. In the picture she wore white. Daniel stood beside her. Margaret cried in the front row, and Charles looked proud. She had once thought that was the day she entered a family. Now she understood. She had also entered a system where truth had to be pressed flat before being brought before the adults. Civil doesn't mean letting you publish the lie first, she said. Daniel did not answer. On the day of the anniversary party, Emily wore the green dress Margaret had given her for her birthday the year before. It was deep emerald, boat-necked, with 3/4 sleeves, tailored so well that Margaret had once said, "That color makes your eyes shine." Emily stood in front of the bedroom mirror, pulling up the zipper, looking at the face she had carefully made up. Foundation hid the shadows beneath her eyes. Dusty rose lipstick made her mouth look alive. Her hair was pinned low, pearl earrings small and proper, exactly the image of the perfect Parker daughter-in-law. She looked like a woman prepared to appear in photographs, not a woman whose husband had just placed her inside divorce paperwork. On the bed lay her handbag, and inside it were a copy of the petition, a screenshot of Mark's message, the garage recording, Daniel's draft announcement, and a short timeline she had written at 2 in the morning. She did not know exactly how she would use them. But for the first time, she was not arriving empty-handed. Daniel stood in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look beautiful." Emily met his eyes in the mirror. "Don't," he exhaled. "I'm just complimenting you." "No, you're repainting the scene." He stepped inside, stopping a short distance from her. "Just tonight." The phrase sat between them, terrifyingly familiar. "Just tonight, just this dinner. Just don't say anything while my mother is happy, just help me this once, just don't make a scene." Emily turned and looked at him. "You've said that sentence in different forms for 12 years. Daniel frowned, but had no time to respond because Margaret was calling from downstairs to ask whether they were on their way. He looked at the screen, then at Emily. "My mother." Emily did not take the phone the way she used to, did not say "I'll answer for you." Daniel had to tap accept himself. "Yes, Mom, we're leaving now." He spoke for a few moments, then hung up, his expression faintly annoyed. "You weren't going to say anything? You did very well, Emily. Practice." He looked at her, not understanding or not wanting to. She picked up her bag and went down the stairs first. On the shelf by the door their wedding photo watched her leave with its old smile. The Parker house was so full that night the air seemed polished with laughter, champagne, and expectation. White flowers were arranged everywhere. On the living room screen, a slideshow moved through photos of Charles and Margaret when they were young, their wedding, Daniel at his law school graduation, Abigail as a little girl holding cotton candy, and then Emily appearing year after year. Emily at her first Thanksgiving, Emily helping Margaret after surgery, Emily and Daniel at the beach with the family, Emily standing beside Daniel in every picture, always leaning slightly toward him, always smiling enough to make the frame look whole. A pianist in the corner played soft jazz. Charles wore a gray suit, standing as straight as a judge who had not fully retired inside his own body. Margaret wore a cream dress, her knee lightly wrapped underneath, her face radiant because the house was full. Abigail sat more than she stood, Ryan beside her, though her eyes kept searching for Emily. Daniel moved his hand behind Emily's back when they entered the room, not quite touching, but close enough for outsiders to see them as a pair. "Just tonight," he whispered again. Emily did not answer. She went to greet Aunt Lorraine, Uncle Peter, the people she had sent thank you cards to, remembered shellfish allergies for, called to confirm flight times. One of Daniel's uncles, Michael Parker, a name shared by many Southern men in the family, laughed loudly and asked, "Daniel, Emily, when are you two going to throw a big 15th anniversary party like your parents?" Daniel smiled, a smile trained by the entire family. "Emily's already planning it. You know her." The table laughed. Emily stood beside him, holding a glass of water. Hearing her name used to maintain a future that did not exist. She looked at Daniel. He did not look back. He had lied as easily as breathing because the room loved lies that made them feel at peace. A few minutes later, Margaret tapped her glass, thanked everyone for coming, spoke about 45 years of marriage, and then unexpectedly turned toward Emily. "Before Charles and I say a few words, I want Emily to come up here. This girl has kept this family close for years. Without her, half the people in this room probably wouldn't get their cards on time." People laughed affectionately. Emily saw Daniel go slightly pale. It was not in the script. Abigail looked at her from her chair, eyes wide, as if she knew something was about to happen but did not know whether to fear it or hope for it. Emily set down her water. In her handbag, the manila envelope felt like a hot object. She stepped forward into the room. Emily stood beneath the yellow light, in front of the 45th anniversary cake covered in white frosting and sugar flowers. Before the people she had loved through action more than words for 12 years, she looked at Margaret, who had once called her a daughter. At Charles, who rarely praised anyone but had once placed a hand on her shoulder after Margaret's surgery and said, "You did well." At Abigail, who had asked her to be godmother. At Daniel, standing to the left of the slideshow screen, his smile tight, his eyes warning her. She could give a beautiful speech. She knew how. She could speak about enduring love, about Parker tradition, about Sunday dinners, about the way Charles and Margaret had taught them to live with responsibility. She had written speeches like that for Daniel many times. She knew which sentence would make Margaret cry, which one would make Charles nod, which one would make the relatives applaud. And because she knew, she understood that if she did it tonight, she would not merely be silent. She would co-sign Daniel's lie with the last talent he still wanted to use. Emily placed both hands on the edge of the table. "I've learned so much from this family," she began. Her voice was steadier than she expected. I learned how a meal can make people feel welcomed. I learned that birthdays, phone calls, cards, and dishes brought at the right time are not just rituals. They are ways people tell one another, I still remember you. Margaret smiled, her eyes wet. Daniel exhaled a little, perhaps thinking she was going in the right direction. Emily continued. I also learned that a family can be so beautiful that people become afraid to touch the truth because they are afraid of scratching the surface. And tonight, I don't want to scratch anything out of anger. I want to tell the truth because I was asked to do the opposite. The room changed, no one spoke, but the piano in the corner seemed to soften. Daniel took half a step forward. Emily. She took the manila envelope from her handbag and placed it on the table beside the anniversary cake. The sound of paper touching wood was not loud, but it landed in the room like a hammer. Daniel filed for divorce before telling me. He gave me this petition Thursday night and immediately asked me not to tell the family for a few weeks so this anniversary, Abigail's pregnancy, and his career would not be affected. The air left the room. Margaret lifted a hand to her chest. Abigail stood too quickly, and Ryan had to catch her elbow. Charles no longer touched his wine glass. Daniel stepped forward, his voice low but hard. Emily not here, she turned to him. You chose a lawyer before you chose to talk to me. You chose friends before you chose family. You chose reputation before truth. This is the first time I'm not choosing for you. Daniel looked around, saw every eye turning toward him, and for the first time Emily saw him fail to find a sentence that was both polite and capable of controlling the room. He said, Everyone, this is complicated. Emily is in a lot of pain, and I've tried to handle this in a civil way. Emily took out her phone and opened the garage recording, not playing it too loudly, only close enough to the room's microphone when Abigail, pale-faced, stepped forward and raised the volume for her. Daniel's voice came through the speaker, slightly distorted but clear. I'll frame it as mutual. She's emotional, but she'll come around. Emily doesn't like public conflict. My family can't hear it from her first. The final sentence fell, and no one in the room could call Emily's silence civilized anymore. Margaret opened the envelope with trembling hands. She did not read the whole thing, only looked at the first page, the filing date, then at Daniel. You filed before telling your wife? Daniel opened his mouth. Mom, I was going to tell you. I just wanted. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. You filed before telling your wife? The same question. But from Charles's mouth it was not a question. It was a verdict waiting for a signature. Daniel remained silent for one beat too long. In that silence, every defense died before being spoken. Margaret sat down, the paper still in her hand, her eyes looking neither at Emily nor at Daniel, as if she had just discovered that her house did not merely have a crack, but had been used to hide the crack. Abigail cried. You made her help Mom prepare the party, she said, her voice breaking. You let her stand in my nursery and let me ask her to be godmother while you knew. Daniel looked at his sister. Abby, I didn't want to stress you out. Abigail placed a hand on her stomach and laughed through tears, wounded. You used me to keep her quiet. Daniel turned to Charles. Dad, I only wanted to avoid turning this into a spectacle. Charles looked at him with the eyes that had made hundreds of people in courtrooms lower their voices. You turned your wife into the spectacle. No one clapped. There was no bright victory. Truth in real life does not make a room explode the way it does in movies. It makes people not know where to put their hands. Aunt Lorraine cried silently. Uncle Peter stared down at the floor. A younger cousin whispered, Oh my God, before her mother touched her hand to quiet her. Daniel stood in the middle of the room that had once lifted him up as the perfect eldest son, and for the first time Emily was not beside him to translate his neglect into busyness, his selfishness into work pressure, his cowardice into, he just doesn't want to hurt anyone. Margaret trembled so badly that Emily's body by instinct wanted to step forward and steady her. Her body made the motion before thought could catch up. Then she stopped. Margaret had Charles, she had Abigail, she had relatives. Emily could not keep cleaning up Daniel's consequences. She stood still. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done. Emily left the Parker house before midnight. The party did not end, but it was no longer a party. People spoke softly. Champagne glasses were abandoned. The anniversary cake was only half cut. The slideshow kept playing for a while until Abigail turned it off, and the final image before the screen went dark was a photo of Emily helping Margaret down the porch steps after surgery. Daniel beside them holding flowers, looking like a son caring for his mother. Abigail hugged Emily on the porch, her belly between them, hot tears against Emily's shoulder. I'm sorry, Abigail said. I didn't know, I should have seen. Emily smoothed her hair. You're about to have a baby. This wasn't yours to carry, but you're my family. That sentence hurt Emily more than silence would have. I know. Charles came outside and stood under the porch roof. He did not hug her. He had never been an easy man to hug. But he looked at Emily for a long time and said, "You were not wrong to tell the truth." The sentence was not warm, not enough to mend anything. But it was a small wooden post in the flood, enough to keep Emily from being swept away completely. Margaret did not come outside to say goodbye. Emily did not know whether it was anger, shame, pain, or all of it. She did not blame her. Or she was not yet strong enough to know whether she did. Daniel ran out to the parking area as she opened her car door. The rain had started again, light and cold, wetting the hair at his forehead. "You humiliated me," he said. "Not you hurt me, not I'm sorry. Humiliated." At last the accurate word appeared. Emily stood beside the car, the green dress Margaret had given her speckled with rain at the shoulders. "No, I stopped committing perjury for you." Daniel breathed hard. "You don't understand the consequences of tonight. I understand them very clearly. The difference is this time they don't fall only on me. You'll lose them." That was the final blow, and because it was partly true, it hurt. "Maybe," Emily said. "But if the price of keeping them is helping you lie, then I had already lost them." Daniel looked at her, no longer fully polite for the first time. He was not shouting, but his face looked barer, smaller, less handsome. "You used to be kinder." Emily opened the car door. "No, I used to be quieter." She drove back to the shared house in the rain, past familiar streets, porch lights soft and yellow, as if every other house still knew how to be warm. Her house had one light glowing over the porch. Inside, everything was neat, everything in its place. She went upstairs, took off the green dress, and hung it over the back of a chair instead of folding it right away as she usually would. The dress draped there, beautiful and tired. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the room where she had slept beside Daniel for so many years, and did not cry, not because she was strong, because some falls are so deep that tears arrive late. The months after did not give Emily a clean victory. Divorce was a sequence of small, cold tasks, lawyer emails, asset lists, who kept the house, who paid which loan, who took the wedding china. Sentences that had once belonged to their private life were moved into spreadsheets and documents. Daniel still tried to keep his tone civil in emails, writing, "I hope we can handle this with dignity," and Emily learned to answer briefly, without over-explaining, without softening things for him. Margaret called once, her voice tired, saying she needed time. Emily said she understood. Abigail still texted, sending ultrasound photos, then photos of the baby after she was born, a little girl named Clara Margaret. Emily went to the hospital after Abigail invited her privately, standing just outside the room and watching Daniel hold his niece, Charles, beside him, Margaret crying. Daniel looked at Emily as if he no longer knew where to place her. She brought a gift for the baby, a cream-colored blanket she had chosen herself, not too intimate, not cold. Abigail hugged her for a long time. Margaret looked at her from the chair beside the bed, eyes red, and said very softly, "Thank you for coming." Emily nodded. Not every thread was cut at once. Some remained, but when touched, they only hurt. She moved out of the shared house and into a smaller townhouse near the clinic in March. The new place had 2 bedrooms, a narrow staircase, a much smaller kitchen, a window looking out onto a parking lot, and a young dogwood tree. On her first night there, she sat among cardboard boxes, eating canned soup with a plastic spoon because she had not yet found the box with the kitchen things, and listened to the silence. It was not the silence of a dead marriage where another person is in the house but no longer tells the truth. This was the silence of a place that did not know her yet. It was not warm, but it did not ask her to perform. One morning in May, when spring had turned the trees in Charlotte bright green, and the clinic was filling with children suffering from pollen allergies, Emily received a text from Margaret. "Do you know if Daniel has sent Charles's supplemental insurance papers yet? I texted him but he hasn't answered." Emily sat in her car outside the clinic, phone in her hand, staring at the words for a long time. The old habit woke faster than the pain. Her finger almost opened Daniel's contact automatically, almost typed, "Your mom is asking about your dad's insurance. Remember to send it before Friday." She looked at that reflex and felt slightly sick. This was what remained after a long marriage. Not only love, not only memory. A nervous system trained to catch a man before he fell into the consequences of his own choices. She set the phone down on the passenger seat. Did not answer right away. She went into the clinic, held the staff meeting, managed the schedule, called insurance for a child who had nothing to do with the Parker family, and did her work with her old precision but a new boundary. At noon she opened her phone and typed to Margaret, "I don't know. You should ask Daniel directly." She stared at the sentence. It seemed cold, almost impolite compared to who she had been for 12 years. But it was true, she sent it. No smiley face, no "I'm sorry," no "I'll remind him." Margaret replied an hour later. Yes, I understand. Emily did not know whether she truly understood. But for the first time, Margaret's understanding was no longer Emily's responsibility. That evening, Emily opened an old file box to look for her birth certificate, because her lawyer needed a copy for an account procedure. Inside the box were Parker photo albums, Christmas cards, Margaret's handwritten pecan pie recipe, a linen napkin embroidered with the letter P that Emily had once ordered for Thanksgiving, and a copy of the manila envelope. She picked it up. The petition inside was still as cold as it had been on the first day, but she no longer felt it cutting into her skin. It felt like an object that had survived a fire, still smelling of smoke but no longer burning. Emily took a new file folder and labeled it in black pen, "Things I Survived." She placed the divorce petition inside, along with the draft announcement about shared reflection, the screenshot of Mark's message, the transcript of the garage recording, and a photograph from the anniversary party that Abigail had sent later, a photo of Emily standing before the room in the green dress, her hand resting on the envelope, her face so calm that an outsider might have called her cold. She looked at that photo longer than the others. The woman in it did not look happy. She did not look healed. But she was no longer standing beside Daniel to make him look better. She stood alone. In the moment she lost almost everything she had once cared for, and still kept her voice. Emily closed the folder and placed it in the drawer beneath her desk. Outside the townhouse window, spring rain began to fall softly, not so different from the rain on that Thursday night. But this room did not have Daniel sitting at the table with an envelope and a request. No one was there asking her to keep a secret for a few more weeks. No one was calling her silence dignity because it served them. Emily turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a moment, listening to rain touch the glass. She had lost a marriage, lost an in-law family that had once felt like a second home, lost her familiar place in the photographs and parties where people used to say the Parker family would not be whole without her. But she was no longer the bridge Daniel could use to cross over his own consequences. He had filed, he had chosen to leave, and finally, he had to stand inside the story he had created. As for Emily, for the first time in 12 years, she let the truth stand still without running to soften it for someone else.